Invincible blasted onto the scene with a remarkable first season, setting itself up perfectly for future successful seasons. Unfortunately, this has not been coming to fruition, leading me to sitting here making this video from a displeased state of mind. This video is a rant based mainly on Season 3 of Invincible wearing me down and breaking me as a fan of the show. But how did we get to me being a fan of the show, and how are the creators pushing myself and possibly other fans away over time? To answer that, we have to go back to the beginning and establish why this show is loved and what's changed, or in some cases, what hasn't changed. This video is based on the assumption that you have seen the show and know names, places, and the general plot of the story. I explain a lot, but I'm not going into every single detail or part of the show. So if you don't want spoilers or haven't seen the show, then this may not be the video for you. If you haven't seen it, I do recommend Season 1 strongly, then continue at your own risk. Just so you all know what I am setting up, here are my main issues with the show that have been building and are now getting problematic being dragged so long into Season 3. Many of my issues revolve around our main character Mark. Mark is unable to beat most of the villains he comes across, leading to him needing saving from his friends or some other MacGuffin bullshit happening to save Mark. Mark is also incredibly dense, and his mentality is at times insane. I will explain this more with examples later, but this is the reason for the thumbnail calling him infuriating. Another overarching issue is that the villains are constantly reused time and time again. You can never trust that they're gone, and it's so overused at this point that it's annoying. So, those are my main issues. There are more small things that come up here and there, and I'll be covering my main ones and those smaller ones as they come up. All of that being said, I know this is a widely loved show, so I imagine there will be some backlash to this video. I have no relationship with the comics and am purely coming at this from a TV show perspective. I wanted that to be clear so that no one uses the comics to justify the show. I don't care what happens in the comics, you have to release a good show regardless. I want this show to be better, so I intend for this video to lead to conversation about the show and provide examples of things that are dragging down the show in hopes that they may improve. Now, it's time to briefly run through the first and second season to show where these issues started and how they've been festering before turning into true problems as they are now. What makes Season 1 so great? Well, it draws you in from the very first episode and has you riding the edge of your seat as the mystery of Omni-Man gets unraveled. The characters and the interactions are interesting. You have to make your characters interesting and entertaining to make a successful story. Season 1 does this well. Mark is growing up chasing the dream of being just like his superhero dad. When he finds out that the dream is not at all what he expected, it crushes him. As our main character, it is important that we, the audience, are able to connect with him. Through Season 1 and parts of 2, this is possible. They also plant the seeds for other characters to face their own arcs, and going further into the show, they will go through these arcs, which is satisfying. Eventually, the writers seem to forget that your main character also needs a character arc, and that brings in a major issue with the more recent parts of the show, which we will discuss in due time. Back in Season 1, Mark's arc was coming into his own as a superhero and figuring out what he wanted to be. He began on the trajectory to become like his dad, until that became a clearly terrible option. Then his arc shifted and became the choice between his dad and defending his planet in what would likely be a suicide mission. He chose the suicide mission, and in this defied his previously established motives of being like his father, but this was done for a good reason, and it totally makes sense. The choice between your lineage and history that you aren't even aware of, up against the ones who raised you, even if they aren't truly the same as you, that choice defined the first season and gave it a nice lens for the audience to watch from and relate to. Outside of that main conflict in Season 1, there are other conflicts between characters, but you know the position of each character and you can understand it even if it's morally questionable, like Nolan and the Viltrum Empire. They seek to perfect the world. Their method is wrong, but you understand what they're trying to do and how they plan to accomplish it. They are a great villainous entity to have overarching in the show. Nolan is a great villain and potential redemption story as he comes to view the error of his ways, and he changes slowly but surely. All of what the Viltrumites are actually about is slowly shown as the season progresses and ultimately leads to Omni-Man attempting to subject the entirety of Earth. He absolutely could do it, but he is stopped, not physically by anyone, not even Mark. He is emotionally stopped when he sees what he's done to his son and abandons his mission. This sets the stage for the second season and what has ultimately become one of the show's largest glaring issues. But we're not there quite yet. A little more setup to get there, but let's start with a red flag of the creators struggling to write balanced characters and briefly touch on Season 1 Amber. She is largely panned as a horrid character who is incredibly unfair to Mark all season long, the key issue being she's unfair after she knows that he's invincible. She constantly blames him for missing dates or being late, all while knowing he is saving people and risking his own life to do it. It is blatantly absurd and makes Amber into a wicked character. I won't dive into this too deep because there are many videos specifically about that subject. My point here is to show that the writers went completely awry with her character, and it won't be the last time that a character is needlessly dense. A little subtle foreshadowing, if you will. So, Season 1 leaves us with Mark broken and beaten. He has navigated a character arc, and while exciting, don't get used to it because it's actually the last time this happens for Mark. Season 2 took the exciting pace of Season 1 and brought it to a screeching halt. It is honestly impressive how slow this season progressed and how ultimately it didn't feel like much of anything happened after it was all said and done. I had been hearing that it was only that way because they were setting things up and that Season 3 would be so much more exciting. Well, again, we will get there when we get there, but no, Season 2 being slow was not a one-off deal at all. Anyway, what do we have to discuss in Season 2? This is the main establishing point for Mark's pivotal idealism that he does not kill. Virtuous by design, infuriating in practice. It is great to have a hero who wants to be virtuous, but in the universe that Invincible occupies, there are many instances where this ideal is simply not an option. This mindset of Mark's leads to what has become my largest gripe of this show so far, and it has no sign of slowing down. I was willing to roll with it for the arc of Season 2. It made sense here. He is coming back from the attack by Nolan and is adamantly expressing that he is not his father. Absolutely, this is understandable that his trauma would cause this response. I understand not wanting to kill willy-nilly, I'm all for that. Heroes shouldn't just kill everyone. But, holy shit, Mark, sometimes you have no choice. He's faced with that in two main situations this season. The first takes place on Thraxa during the mid-season finale. Thraxa is under attack by Viltrumites who are coming to eradicate the Thraxans and get Nolan into custody for his abandonment of Post. All that Mark and Nolan know is that if they don't stop the attacking Viltrumites, then this planet will be wiped out, and they will likely be killed as well. When the fight breaks out, Mark is specifically trying not to kill the Viltrumites, which for him is not an option. That is made clear quickly when they start mopping the floor with him. He is saved by Nolan thankfully because Mark is unable to sustain the fight in this way. So what does he do after that major mistake? Oh yeah, he does the same exact thing right after and is getting his shit rocked by a different Viltrumite. Finally, Nolan gets through to Mark and he begins to savagely fight. He has to do this. As far as he knows, it is him or her, and she is a much better, more experienced fighter. He has to make up for that and attack her like an onslaught with everything he has. It works. He gets damage in on her finally and has her dead to rights. Then, his ideal comes back and he hesitates. She takes the opening and ends the fight, stabbing him right through the chest. It didn't matter that the whole planet was on the line. It didn't matter that his dad's life was on the line. It didn't matter that his brother's life was on the line, and it apparently didn't matter that his life was on the line. He was unable to overcome his idealistic perspective. However, we are still early into this perspective, so I was not yet bothered by it in this scene. So long as he took this lesson and learned from it, then I would be satisfied. And you know what? The finale for the season presents Mark with the perfect opportunity to redeem himself and do what is necessary to save himself and his remaining family. Angstrom Levy breaks into Mark's house, taking Debbie and Oliver captive in a ploy to get Mark to the house. His goal is to kill Mark, but not before mentally toying with him and harming his family. Faced with this, Mark does try to save the day without killing Angstrom. At first, I am all about that. Try talking him down briefly, but once it is clear that Angstrom is here to stay, no matter what you say, then it is time to take the gloves off and take out the threat. It is you or him or your family. Mark surprisingly gets to this point eventually and does what he needs to do. He eliminates the threat instead of getting pub stomped like he always seems to. My initial reaction was that of joy. Mark is finally past his idealism and will realize that sometimes you simply don't have a choice. You have to do what is necessary for yourself and others to survive. I accepted that he would have a short time where he would struggle to come to terms with what he did to Angstrom, but I foolishly assumed that he would learn and grow from this moment and that of the mid-season finale. I was wrong. When we move on to Season 3, we will find a much more depressing truth in front of us. Now we have made it to the current season. I had such high hopes, and I have been nothing short of let down by this show. It has genuinely become infuriating to watch. Every episode feels the same. You hear the same things, you see the same things, you experience the same hair-pulling moments over and over and over. From the start of the show, Mark has been bullied by every villain he crosses. He is incompetent as a fighter, and at first that's fine. We are now 3 seasons in. He needs more than a random single fight once in a while that he wins on rare occasions. He is always saved by a friend or some other random bullshit. On top of that, he is so stuck in the mud morally that I can hardly stand watching him. This show is about Mark and his time as Invincible. The most well fleshed out character should be him. The one the audience cares about should be him. But it is nearly impossible to do that. You know who I enjoy the most and never expected I would? Rex. I want more Rex, because he is a complicated character who has undergone a major character arc and change since Season 1. From a complete douche that took advantage of everyone, he began to take his job a little more seriously and nearly got himself killed trying to defend against the Lizard League. Rex came back from that and realized his misdeeds through his whole life up to that point. He then makes a pointed effort to change and improve himself for himself and for those around him. You can sympathize with Rex and understand him. He is making an active effort to be better, and on top of that, he is an entertaining, funny character. I want to see him on screen. I am happy when he is on screen. I say all of this to briefly summarize a character arc that the show handles so well, to compare then to what they're doing with Mark. So let me explain every episode that Mark exists in. We don't kill people. I suck at fighting. I am incapable of seeing any other perspective but my own, and my personal favorite, you're going to jail or prison. Plus, a bonus feature that has been piling up since the beginning, almost no one dies in the show. Villains especially get recycled time and time again. I guess I should clarify, people die, but those villains just, oh my god, they keep coming back. I'm sick of seeing the same people over and over. So in a moment, we're going to start going episode by episode through Season 3, because that's the main focus of this video. But before I do that, I want to point out that everything I've recorded and written up to this point was done after episode 6 of Season 3. That's going to explain why this introduction to Season 3 did not have some foresight into characters' futures like Rex, and why some of the episode by episode moments don't quite have all the information you'd think they have. And that's because I was writing these thoughts and now I'm relaying them from the time of what I knew at that point, which was not a lot. I didn't know what was happening in the next episode. So this one moment here is an editor's note to say, not everything was known. That's why this whole Rex conversation just happened, and then I turned out to be completely fucking wrong about him in the saddest way. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Episode 7 and 8 will be much more up-to-date thoughts at that time. Everything else is only based on what I would have known during that episode. Season 3, Episode 1, Mark and Rex take on Multipol. Mark annihilates clone after clone. It is just a clone, so whatever, I guess it's really not violating his no-kill rule. He takes down Paul and then tells him that he's going to jail. Fair enough. This is, of course, after telling the Declaration of Independence thieves that they are also going to go to jail, which they don't.
Think, Mark!
Doc Seismic, yep, he's back, captures all heroes at once but leaves Mark, Eve, and Oliver out and about. It is do or die, and Mark has to do what is necessary to save everyone. So, of course, he goes into the fight and is absolutely fucking useless. All the hype about his stats getting better, it was useless, because the first real conflict of the season, he gets rocked. Fear not, he is saved by Cecil and the Reaniman. This leaves Doc Seismic in jail again, so he can come back again. Just wait, I'm sure he will.
Think, Mark!
Oh yes, this Reaniman incident gets to start off a whole slew of shit that Mark gets to be a stick in the mud about later. For now, the episode 1 recap is that Mark is still useless, and he's going to be dense and get more dense about all this Reaniman stuff later. Season 3, Episode 2 gives a ton of Cecil backstory, which is necessary and shows why he is the way that he is, so that we can understand why he does the things he does. And those are the things that Mark views as so abhorrent. So naturally, Mark goes on a Reaniman killing spree. Oh, he can win fights? I guess once in a blue moon, yeah, he can pull off the seemingly impossible. The Reanimen, yes, they come from a man who has demented and tortured many, many people. He is now under strict control and not using live subjects, but previously passed away cadavers. All things considered, this is a good balance to strike when there is extra help for the heroes of Earth, and it doesn't come at the cost of human suffering like the previous D.A. Sinclair's experiments. Mark vehemently disagrees and destroys every Reaniman that is sent after him in an attempt to calm him down. He gives Cecil no chance to explain himself, and for the few words Cecil does get out, they fall on dense ears. Where I give Mark some credit, and the Guardians of the Globe for that matter, is on the chip placed in Mark's head. I get that Cecil wants to protect himself and the planet from an Omni-Man situation, but with the chip, you can only serve to infuriate Mark and possibly lead him down that path you're trying to avoid. It is much easier to explain the Reaniman than it is the chip, and I can, understand that. You don't want a chip that can completely debilitate you inside your head. I understand Mark's reaction to the chip, and I understand the half of the Guardians who leave because of it. What I don't understand is Mark's absolute stick-in-the-mud mentality when it comes to the Reaniman. I understand what they did to your friend's boyfriend. I understand all of that. But I don't get that you are completely unwilling to even listen. Just give Cecil a minute to talk and explain it. Instead, you just scream at him and threaten him and kill everything he sends at you. Give it a moment to try to even think about it and give it more than a single second of thought.
Think, Mark!
He is so black and white with everything that he doesn't allow himself to see gray area and allow nuance to come into any situation. It is infuriating, and it stays infuriating every time it happens. Season 3, Episode 3 opens with 7 minutes of nothing before there is dialogue or sound design. I'm aware that this show has been criticized for its slow release, and I can't help but feel that this opening was a direct result of that. Whether it be for production speed or budget reasons, this is one of the most bizarre openings I have seen to an episode of a show in a long time. I should not sit here and think, what the fuck is happening right now? Was this really them trying to cut corners by not needing voice actors or any sound design for the scene? There are ways to tell an emotional story. This was not it. I had just recently watched The Last of Us and got to see an entire episode dedicated to a love story that was infinitely better than what Invincible had to offer. Already walking on thin ice, I was not enjoying this at all. Not to worry though, because near the end of those 7 strange minutes, we get some good old classic Mark. Mark is restrained and at the mercy of the 2 villains he is trying to fight. He is saved by his little brother. He leaves these 2 to get scooped up by the authorities and go to prison. Then he has the audacity to get mad at Oliver. This little dude just saved you because again, Mark, you're incapable of fighting anyone. I don't even know how you get your suit on at this point. So naturally later in the episode, Mark has to face 2 villains he already faced before. He does actually stop them in one of the rare occasions that he wins, and again though he ships them off to prison, naturally they're going to come back. Considering how many villains come back time and time again, it really seems that maybe prison just doesn't work in this world. Is it just an overnight stay or what? This episode is capped off with a fight against the Mauler twins. Mark, of course you guessed it, is losing this fight before he is saved by Oliver. Given a moment to breathe, Mark follows that up by getting instantly bodied by the Maulers again. He steps up enough to get them off Oliver, but then he has to leave the fight because of the missile being launched. Oliver stays behind to face the Mauler twins, who have been around since the first episode of the show. He does in seconds what Mark has been unable to do in all 3 seasons. He kills the Mauler twins. I was losing my mind at this when it happened. This literal child is able to handle business when it matters. The Mauler twins have been locked up many times and always get out, always cause damage, always harm more people. Oliver took them out and Mark is losing his mind over it. I get it, it was a brutal kill by Oliver, but these guys have clearly never been stopped by being locked up, so Mark's plan was to lock them up again.
Think, Mark!
The argument with Oliver leaves Mark seeing no gray area again. Nowhere to see another point of view again. Killing is bad in all cases, and he can't seem to fathom saving someone else or himself as a reason one may kill. You wouldn't be doing it for the thrill, you would do it to stay alive. This issue is getting tiring, and it isn't even close to over. The Mauler twins are dead, but with how much people come back, I highly doubt it will be the last time we see them. So, episode 3 was more of Mark losing, being saved by others, and again being unwilling to even slightly adjust his mindset. AKA, he's still as dense as ever. Oh, and guess what? Angstrom Levy is back. Fuck, dude, I can't stand this anymore. This is ridiculous. Season 3, Episode 4. Now, I was on the fence with the show through 3 episodes. I was ready to hop off and be truly annoyed, or I was ready to get back on and enjoy the show again. This episode threw me off that fence, spit on me, and told me that this is how it's going to be, so enjoy Mark being a dense, useless hero. Episode 4 starts with Mark giving no thought to the fact that a drone watching him may not have been from Cecil or the GDA. He busts into the Pentagon and starts destroying everything without even attempting a somewhat civil approach. After all of that, he is later approached by the pair who stole the Declaration of Independence in the first episode of Season 3. Of course, Mark is quick to remind them of what class? That's right, that they're supposed to be in prison. Anyway, they bring him to their time to overthrow their king and save people from ruthless subjugation. As it turns out, in an interesting twist, this ruthless king is none other than the Immortal. He has gone insane and claims that Mark left him in charge of this future Earth. The Immortal blames Mark for what is happening and says that all of the pain he caused on Earth was an attempt to lure Mark back so he could fix what he caused. It is at this point that the Immortal begs Mark to kill him. Mark, of course, refuses because he's Mark. The Immortal says then that it's you or me. You kill me, or I kill you, Mark. Naturally, when faced with the option to save his life and end the suffering of a whole planet, while at the same time fulfilling this wish of the Immortal to die, Mark refuses.
Think, Mark!
I mean, really? Can there be any time where Mark killing is more justified than this very moment, and he still won't do it? Good lord, this had me fuming. Eventually, after dancing around it, Mark does end the Immortal. Not by his own choice, but because the Immortal wouldn't stop trying to kill him. I did not feel proud of Mark. I did not feel joy or relief that he did it. I was annoyed that it took so long, and doubly annoyed when Mark acted like it was the end of the fucking world. We then spend a long segment with Alan and Nolan. This was enjoyable to watch. We have 2 entertaining characters working together when Alan fools Nolan into assisting, and now they're officially teamed up. This episode reinforced for me that I only care about 3 things in the show, and their names are Rex, Alan, and Nolan. Mark could disappear from this show at this moment, and I wouldn't be upset. Season 3, Episode 5. I just about lost my mind only 5 minutes into this episode. Duplicate needs to eliminate the clone that was speaking to Paul because it is infected with the Mark virus. She is having a brain-dead discussion, and it's all about how Paul needs to be in jail because he is a murderer and blah 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 blah. Paul correctly points out her hypocrisy, and she gets annoyed and leaves. I couldn't believe that not only do I have to watch Mark have that conversation with Debbie or Oliver or anyone else all the time, now I have to see it from other characters too? It's unreal. This is why I'm saying that every episode feels the same in this season. It's absurd. I've had enough of this conversation, of this stupid moral point where every character is either on one side of the fence or the other, and people are not willing to see the other side. This is not entertaining to watch. Mark, of course, is not getting any more character depth. But here's a crazy thing. This episode manages to give Oliver more depth. Just when it seems he may be a maniacal killer, the creators go to show that he is just a kid. He goes and makes friends and defends them from bullies by not killing them, but by embarrassing them. It isn't a full-blown character arc or anything, but they're adding layers to make Oliver more complicated and compelling as a character. Maybe they'll give Mark that treatment someday. So, the big plot of the episode is that Titan is trying to maintain control all while the Order wants to break Paul out of the prison that Mark defends. The Order sends their leader Mr. Liu, who is also a mythological dragon. Mark steps up to the plate and starts fighting. There are some cool combo moves he and Eve pull off, but don't worry, we won't stray from the formula. Mark gets destroyed and is about to die when he is saved by some bullshit. The Order leader who turns into the dragon is shot in the head of his vulnerable body, and the dragon disappears right before killing Mark. Wow, I love seeing my hero be useless. Also, without straying from the formula at all, Mr. Liu, who was shot in the head, is revived by his bodyguard, which means the dragon will be back. Can we seriously not let someone die ever? Season 3, Episode 6 is what I like to call the Battle of the Density. Good grief, Mark and Powerplex are a dangerous combination of dense. Powerplex is pissed at Mark for the events of Season 1 in Chicago when Mark was helplessly trying to stop Omni-Man from subjugating Earth. Powerplex believes that Mark was also trying to take over Earth. To a point, I could almost believe that until you show us Powerplex sitting there, watching footage from that event, which clearly shows Mark trying to break free from Omni-Man's hold. He isn't working with Omni-Man, he wants to escape. Unbelievable to have your villain of the episode be so foolish, only to be rivaled by, of course, your main character, who you always want to have be completely stupid. This is such a waste of Aaron Paul. I love him, and it sucks seeing him play such a dreadful, stupid character. Briefly on that note, all the voice actors do an incredible job in this show. It's the material they work with that is insane. Anyway, Mark won't stand for someone coming for his density throne. He doesn't even try to convince Powerplex that he wasn't killing people in Chicago, that he was trying to stop Omni-Man and was forced into that subway or forced into the buildings. No attempt made by Mark on that front. Eventually, Powerplex goes Super Saiyan and dusts his wife and child. You'd think maybe he'd see what he's done is wrong, but no, he blames Mark for it. The density meter is overflowing. Even after he had time to cool off in prison, he still is adamant that it was Mark's fault. Insane work. I am at the point where every episode to this point has gone the same, and between episodes 6 and 7 is when I started writing the script. Mark is completely stuck on his one point of view. He can't fight, has to be saved by everyone, and only sends people to prison so they can break out later. Villains so rarely go away, they just keep getting recycled. Beyond that, the show is basically going nowhere and has been since the middle of Season 2. The pace is incredibly slow. Let's see if the next 2 episodes can get this show back on track again. If you're seeing this video, then no, the show probably didn't get back on track. Season 3, Episode 7. Angstrom actually didn't die. That's the worst option they could have gone with. I assumed at first it was going to be an alternate version of him or something, just like the Marks he's recruited, and I think they should have gone that way. Now knowing this, it makes Mark's whole moral breakdown even more worthless. His newest inciting incident of Angstrom didn't even go how he thought. Of course he doesn't know that, so it makes sense that he was upset by it thinking he killed this man, but now we know that he didn't. He just didn't. He failed, and there's literally no way that Angstrom survived that. I'm sorry. He didn't have a head. Whatever. Now Mark is all sad about Powerplex because Mark got him into jail exactly like he wanted. So you kill, you're upset. You put them in jail, you're upset. I guess just retire, mate. The Many Marks was a very cool stretch of scenes that did not end how I expected at all. I figured a big thing like that was gonna last much longer, so it was kind of odd and surprising to see them stranded. The same goes for Angstrom, who came back with all this setup for a very brief time doing anything. His end seemed to be pretty hard to escape, but I'm sure with how this show works, he will be back again, which is why they left his end and that of the Marks ambiguous. Now, I get to be pissed again. This show took one of the 3 things I cared about and killed it. They took my boy Rex. I can't believe that just days before the episode 7 release, I wrote that I wanted Rex alive, but I felt he was going to die. I'm glad that he got his hero journey and end, but damn am I upset to see him go. Then, of course, there is the stuff between Mark and Cecil. Mark, again, still being stuck in his ways, ignores Cecil and the greater good for his own selfish choices to watch Eve. Thankfully, the walls do seem to be coming down, and Mark is perhaps coming around slowly to Cecil again and helping out the GDA. This episode also has a moment with Powerplex, which is power perplexing. When Mark and Cecil initially walk onto scene in a ruined city, they are discussing what to do to fix the cities broken by the alternate Invincibles. Powerplex is there and still angry and Invincible for the previous events with Omni-Man, which somehow he still hasn't realized aren't Mark's fault. Now, everyone in the current day knows that our Invincible didn't cause the destruction here, but rather it was the alternate versions of Invincible. Powerplex is, of course, the one person who doesn't know this somehow, and he attacks Mark. During said attack, and once Powerplex is under control, no one, and I mean no one, speaks up to simply say, it wasn't our Invincible who did this. No one comes to defend Mark. No one tries to explain to this dense man Powerplex that he is wrong. It's crazy to me that no writer thought it was strange to see no one stand up for Mark and continue letting Powerplex behave as he always has with no attempt to correct him. It's just another moment that leaves me scratching my head about the writing of this story and how a lot of these small moments or even the bigger moments don't really make sense. They don't add up. It's just not how people behave. No one's going to just sit there and let this guy continually be stupid and attack Mark for no reason. Somebody would say something, right? The end of this episode brings the arrival of Conquest, voiced by the wonderful Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who I first truly knew as Negan from The Walking Dead. This is, of course, an interesting and exciting lead to the finale, my assumption being Mark nuts up and handles business, otherwise I see no way he gets out of it, of course unless he is once again saved by someone else. I truly hope the pattern of this show isn't going to become 6 bad episodes and 2 good or great episodes per season, but that's been the trend of season 2 and 3. So we will see what waits for us in the finale a week away from writing this. Episode 8. It's time to make something out of this season. Can you do it? Kicking off, we thankfully pick up right away with the Conquest fight. Mark is trying to fight, and it is clear early that Conquest is letting him have free hits to see what Mark is all about. When Conquest blows that blood bubble into a heart shape, that may be one of the goofiest things I've seen in a while, but I loved it for that. Once Conquest actually fights, it goes to show how powerful he is and how in danger Mark is. Oliver deploys to the rescue and gives Mark a brief moment to recover. It is quickly thrown away because Conquest is just that strong. Mark gets another round of free hits, which lead to nothing against Conquest. Oliver is removed from the fight after nearly dying and is replaced shortly by Eve. Turns out that Eve is able to hold her own briefly against a Viltrumite, but eventually is toppled. This awakens a deeper level to her power, which she uses to repair her own mortal injuries and torch Conquest. That is pretty dope. However, that happens right after such a strange switch up that I did not see coming. Conquest reveals to Mark the depth of his loneliness. I get it, it makes sense, it tracks with the kind of life he leads by destroying everything. Still, kind of felt odd and wasn't quite earned from a character who we only got to know specifically for a very short time. Regardless, after the Eve torching and a few aggressive butterfly kisses from Mark, Conquest is dead. I pressed F to doubt in that moment, and oh, you know what? I was right. He is still sort of alive and deep under Cecil's thumb, who plans to use Conquest upon his awakening to learn about the Viltrumites. This is going to absolutely destroy any semblance of a relationship that Mark and Cecil managed to rebuild, if it goes that way. In terms of if they actually rebuild a relationship at all, Conquest being alive will destroy it. They took time to rub salt in my wound and give Rex a funeral, while also answering the question of the future Rex that we saw at the end of Season 2. There are a lot of moving pieces being set up right now, and unfortunately they currently feel entirely disjointed. Angstrom is doing his thing, Battle Beast is doing his thing, Darkblood is doing his thing, and then somehow we got no updates on Nolan and Alan to end the season. There is a lot there, and while yes, they're all over the place right now, it lets me cling to hope that eventually it's going to come to something down the line. There are issues that still persist, and we will see what happens. We will have to wait and see if Mark is willing to budge when it comes to people like D.A. Sinclair and other things he dislikes about the GDA. Villains continue to stick around forever, Conquest isn't gone, Darkblood is back, and so too are all the other villains from the previous episodes. However, I saved the best part for last, because after 2 whole seasons, Mark finally realizes that he needs to do what is necessary to protect himself, his family, and his planet. Thank you, writers, for giving me that one at least. Episode 8 did not save the season as a whole. I think there was too much damage, but it sure as hell instilled a little faith in me with regards to Mark and the show as a whole going forward. 3 seasons of Invincible have gone by, and now we are back to waiting. This season caused me to make a video about it, and I don't yet have my feet in this space. I plan to do so with movies and TV shows that I love first, but this season was driving me up a wall so much that I ended up pushing all of that aside and solely focusing on this here video. If we look at the season in 2 parts, it is a telling story for how this show goes. Episodes 1 through 6 are pretty bad, like maybe 4 out of 10. The last 2 are pretty damn good, sitting somewhere around an 8 or 9 out of 10. The balance is out of whack there. I don't really want to watch a show if I have to spend 75% of my time disliking it to get to the minority 25% that is really entertaining. That 75% goes across a spectrum of clear boring filler to infuriating stories. Maybe it is only me, but I don't think a show should be built on 6 bad episodes to get to a measly 2 good or great episodes. Just like the end of Season 2, they have set themselves up nicely to create an amazing follow-up season. They were unable to make that happen in Season 3, but I truly hope they can in Season 4. The creators have done amazing work before, and at times they still do. Season 1 was an easy 9 out of 10. Since then, they have seemingly been treading water. This video was never made with the intention to spread hate to anyone working on the show. I am genuinely rooting for them to turn the ship around and keep going on the right path. When this show is at its best, it is amazing. I want it to be good. I want to love the show because when it is good, it's so good. But when it's at its worst, it is the 6-episode stretch to start this season. There are parts to this show that can be made into amazing things, and I am crossing my fingers hoping that they come through. Season 3 is an aggressively mixed bag that had me straight annoyed for more than half of its runtime. Season 4 has got to be a banger. All the pieces are there. The creators have to put them together and make it happen. I am well aware that this video is going to be divisive. If you made it this far and have your own thoughts, comment them down below. I am bracing for impact because I assume the comment section is going to get ugly. Thank you for watching. Farewell. Until next time.